It's 9:05 this morning. Roy Keane turns 50 today, and it has caused massive outpouring of content right across Ireland and indeed the UK. The Athletic had a huge special yesterday. There's a pullout in the Star today, and there's features in all of the newspapers too about it. I'm delighted to say we're joined by one of the best people in the world we could speak to this morning to try and put some context on Roy Keane at 50. Eamon Dunphy, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning, I'm fine.
Before I get into Keane's place in the pantheon of Irish sports people and what his legacy is, I did want to ask you, who was easier to work with, Roy Keane or Bono?
I didn't have any problem with either of them, working with them. Bono was fine, and Roy Keane was very good to work with, and there was, as you know, some fallout for him from the book. And during that, when he took a heavy hit financially and missing games because of something in the book, he was fine. So I didn't have any problem at all with them while I was working with both of them.
Was there similarities in terms of the characteristic that drove them both to greatness?
Well, I think both of them were intelligent. Both of them were funny in private, and in both cases, and I don't say this to be conceited, but in both cases they asked me if I'd write their book, so they wanted me to do it. So they were very cooperative, and I had no problem really with either of them. And these are, like in the case of U2, it was their first autobiography or biography, and in the case of Keane also it was the first. So these can be difficult, and there can be disputes or misunderstandings, but in both cases it was perfect. They were very, very good to work with.
Isn't it interesting that we, as Ireland, and I'm talking Ireland here, have a complicated relationship with both U2 and Roy Keane?
Well, yeah, I mean, I could speak to the Roy Keane controversy, if you like, or they say various things about him. But on a personal level, I found him to be very decent, very funny, very normal. He's 5 lovely children, his wife and his home, very welcoming. You could tell they were a very happy family. And there was nothing to dislike about Keane. He's a very charming fellow when he wants to be charming, when he trusts you. He's very charming and very funny. I think there is 2 sides to his character, obviously, and there is a side of him that's cruel, harsh, illogical, and still very passionate. He's a kind of split personality, really. I'd have to say that.
It's interesting that you mentioned that he's kind and charming when he wants to be. Well, what do you think then? You're saying it's a split personality. What do you think is more of his natural state? Do you think that the charming side of him comes more naturally to him than the confrontational pundit even that we see today?
Well, I think they both come naturally to him, if that makes sense. I mean, you can go, when you walk into someone's home, there's 5 children there, you can tell there's a vibe in the house. And I used to go there to do our interviews preparing for the book, and it just felt very comfortable. He was very loving and comfortable with his children, very respectful of his wife. He invited me to stay for lunch, which I didn't want to do because I wanted to keep a little bit of distance for objectivity's sake. So I think Roy Keane, before he settled down, before he had children, he was wild. He got in a lot of trouble. When he wasn't working, he was a big drinker. He was a wild, not in a bad way, in a kind of laddish way. He had been a wild man off the field as well, but he completely reformed himself. He didn't drink any longer. He knew for his football and for his family, this was something he had to do, and he did it. He didn't talk publicly about it, but he stopped drinking, and he changed the things in his life that were causing him trouble, and he showed great resolution and resolve in doing that. And that again, I think, testifies to his strength of character and his discipline, and it's admirable. I mean, he could have gone the other way, Roy, and if you go back, you probably perhaps too young to remember it, but when he started out, when he'd come home in the summer, go to Cork, around Manchester, Alex Ferguson, he spent a night in a police cell. Ferguson had to come in the morning and get him out. So all that kind of stuff was around him, but he changed, and he deserves enormous credit for that.
In a way, what's happened with the TV stuff and the social media stuff is that it's a little bit cartoonish in some aspects. It's like Roy's angry and it's Ian Wright laughing beside him, or it's Micah Richards laughing beside him. But actually, that story, that origin story of the young kid from Mayfield who writes off to all of the clubs and is rejected because of his size, and is rejected by the FAI because of his size, until eventually he gets discovered on a field in Fairview, I think. Even when the team gets hammered, he stands out as a 14 or 15-year-old, and that's the start of the breakthrough. That bit of the story has kind of been squashed a little bit in the cartoonish later years, where he's just become a parody as a manager, and now is a football pundit almost exclusively. For whatever reason, we've maybe that's just life, Eamon. I don't know.
No, I think his struggles were real. He's very Cork, and Cork people are different. They see themselves as different, and they have what you might call a superiority complex. But they're all, many of them, very funny. They think Dublin is against them. They see themselves as outsiders, and very much a part of Roy's formative experience was, I don't think he was picked for the Irish schoolboy team or the Irish youth teams. He felt he should have been. He did a FOSS course, which was really tough. He had a long, hard journey to even get to Notts Forest. And one scout who picked him out, a scout for one of the big clubs. I mean, Forest were not a big club, and they certainly didn't have a big presence in Ireland. No one went to sleep at night dreaming of playing for Notts Forest, but that's where he went. And he then had, Brian Clough was the person who really made him, encouraged him, believed in him. Believing in him was a huge, Clough's belief in him was a transformative experience. That's what made Roy Keane, because he was small. And in a way, that part of his life has disappeared, melted almost like snow. But it was a very, very important and formative few years between, say, the age of 14 and 20.
Where does he stand in the order of our greatest footballers?
Oh, I don't think, I think when you start trying to say Messi's better than Ronaldo or Ronaldo's better than Messi, all that stuff, great players are incomparable, all in their own way. He stands in the pantheon of the greatest players ever to have played football anywhere. He was a very, very great player. I suppose one way of describing it as just an observer and a fan even, it's not possible to say Roy Keane was the best player ever to play for Manchester United or indeed in the world. What it is possible to say is there was no one you'd rather have on your team if you were a player or in your club if you were a fan. He was a great player, and he'd be the first name on any team sheet, and that would include a team with Messi and Ronaldo, Bobby Charlton, and other great players. He was a very, very great player. He brought in intelligence to the battlefield, a determination. He was an inspirational figure for the players around him. And that ranges from Eric Cantona to Paul Scholes to David Beckham to Peter Schmeichel. He was a very, very, very great warrior, but a warrior who knew he wasn't the headless chicken. He was assessing every moment in a game. He could affect the tempo of a game if he felt it needed to be ratcheted up. He'd ratchet it up. He'd make a tackle. If he felt it needed to be calmed down, he'd calm it down, slow the play down. He read the game brilliantly. Oh, he was awesome. I mean, and also for Ireland as well in many instances. When we played Holland in Lansdowne Road and needed to win to qualify for the World Cup, in the first minute of that game, he clattered Mark Overmars just to send a message to the Dutch. This is what you're going. This is where you are, baby, and it's going to be hard. And in the end, I think Jason McAteer scored the winning goal, but Roy Keane led that, and he did it quite cold-bloodedly from the first minute. He's a great, great player. I don't think anyone who ever saw him play could forget. I mean, there's a cup final against Liverpool where Cantona scored the winner, but Roy Keane was absolutely awesome that day. Awesome.
From this remove, how do you feel about what happened in Saipan now?
Yeah, I still feel the situation was mismanaged. The trigger or the catalyst for the whole thing, at least when they got to Saipan, was an interview Roy Keane gave to Tom Humphries in the Irish Times. When I read the interview in the morning, I thought he was pointing out that this was a very unsuitable place to prepare for the World Cup. He talked about the lack of facilities. He didn't agree with that. I think he complained that they had to go to a social event where there was drink and journalists, which isn't really a big deal, but he thought it was a big deal. That's on the island of Saipan. But I know before he ever embarked on that journey, he arrived to the hotel, Dublin Airport Hotel, the night before they were due to leave. And it was our last interview for the book. And I was there. And he arrived in a very bad mood. He had a serious hip injury that had troubled him for months, was threatening his career, in fact. And Niall Quinn's testimonial a fortnight earlier had been played, and Roy couldn't play in it because he wasn't fit to play. But the newspaper headlines were Keane snubs charity. And Quinn was allegedly giving some of the money to charity. Now, he was raging about that. As he saw it, he'd been stitched up. So even before he got to the hotel, that night he was simmering with rage before he ever got on the plane, and there was nothing to do with facilities. He had a row with a couple of Irish journalists on the plane. He was in very, very bad form. And when he's in bad form, he's dangerous. But he had a reason to be. He had actually been stitched up. Now, a more mature person would have just, said, stuff happens. But he didn't. So he actually embarked on that journey in bad form. And then everything that he saw in Saipan made things worse. But I didn't think the interview with Tom Humphries, to get back to the core point, was anything outrageous. He didn't lash out. It was quite considered. It was no big deal. Now, Mick McCarthy then called a meeting brandishing the Irish Times in his hand. And that's the infamous meeting where Keane said all the things he said. I think Mick should have just let that pass. I'm certain Jack Charlton would have let it pass, and anybody, really, any coach would wanted to let it pass. There was no need to provoke a row. There was certainly no need to call a meeting of the team, brandishing the paper, and to try to force Keane to apologise. That was ridiculous. So it was mismanaged at that level. And these are contexts that are hugely important. That's where the fuse that caused the explosion was lit. So I also think he would have stayed, but I think the final call was made, as I understand it, by McCarthy, who wouldn't back down. And I think, to go on to say that when you consider how well we did in that World Cup, how well we played, add Roy Keane to the mix, and we could have got to the semi-final or the final. And South Korea got to the semi-final.
And the German team obviously reached the final, and they were no great shakes that we obviously drew with.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Is Keane's hip injury something that we probably don't talk about enough? Was he fit?
Yes.
Is that the reason? So obviously he gets accused of snubbing the charity, which is huge, and I understand that causes it.
Totally untrue.
But is the injury actually the thing that's pissing him off the most because he feels he's not going to be able to perform at his level?
I think it's annoying him because he is playing and has played for United for about 18 months when he wasn't really fit. I think he'd been taking injections. I think he'd been really trying to almost hide it to continue competing, ignoring it, and getting through it. So that injury was absolutely critical. And it came into play again when he left United. You know, he talked about playing when he was broken, when his body was broken. And when you consider the way he played, it's not surprising his body was broken. But the injury was a very significant part of the story because a warrior like Keane needs to be super fit. And he knew he wasn't super fit. And that leaves you very vulnerable psychologically behind the facade. Psychologically, it does leave you very vulnerable. And I think that he went to Saipan in that state.
Why do you think there's such division still about that? Because when maybe the facts are still disputed in some people's minds, but when you lay it out like that, like I actually have some sympathy. I have more sympathy now than I did at the time for McCarthy for the way he mishandled it. I understand a little bit more why he did it because that's his character, and he in some way was trapped by his own character, which was I have to be the man here, and I'm trying to be the alpha dog, as opposed to seeing that there is an alpha dog whose job it is to lead the team, and you should just you need to work with that. He tried to be Ferguson when he couldn't actually be Ferguson, but there's not universal acclaim or love for Roy Keane from the Irish football public at the moment. Is that to do with the time with Martin O'Neill, or is it still a hangover from Saipan?
It's difficult to know for sure. I mean, I think for a lot of people, he let us down in Saipan by coming home and causing trouble. He's seen as the troublemaker. So I mean, there was a split. I mean, John Giles and Liam Brady and myself fell out for about 15 minutes in a big way over it. So people were divided, but not everybody knew the whole story. Not everyone had the real context for it, which goes back to the Quinn testimonial and to other slights. And in that sense, Keane can be very volatile. Well, he remains a very volatile character, but I think his time in coaching and management has not been good. That's not what Roy Keane is, really. He is not good at that side of things. He really he doesn't have empathy, shall we say. I mean, in the clip that you played earlier, I heard you play, I think, he's talking about when he's at Sunderland.
Matty Taylor,
And
yeah.
yeah, and he's saying the wives don't want to move to Sunderland. I remember the quote, because the shops are no good. They'd rather be in Manchester or down south or somewhere else. And there was an element of truth in that, perhaps. But the irrationality of it was that Roy's family never moved to Sunderland, that he never moved to Sunderland. He used to come up on a Tuesday. So the thing he was bemoaning in players and their families, he was actually doing himself.
Well, that's the great irony, isn't it? The row with the Ireland team and with Johnny Walters is essentially get out there and train. And Johnny's like, I can't train anymore because my body won't let me do it. And it's like, well, that's exactly what you were going through. And you're kind of accusing him here of not faking injury, but certainly having it up a little bit. And it's like, you can't do that. That's the red rag that caused the whole problem in the first place. Yes,
I mean, to fall out with John Waters over or accuse him of feigning an injury is almost, it's surreal. I mean, John Walters is a fantastic professional and a really good guy, and Harry Arthur was with him as well. And in fact, Declan Rice witnessed that. And Declan Rice is one of the best players in the world now. He's playing for England. But unfortunately, that's true.
It is, yeah. And Jack Grealish could have been on the bench for Martin O'Neill when Keane was there, and Keane was at Villa the whole time too. It's like it's mad. It's mad the kind of Forrest Gump aspect of Irish football, that Keane is there from 1994 and our best player in that World Cup all the way up to Grealish and Rice ending up not playing here. It's like there's few figures. Maybe Giles and Keane have had the influence on Irish football. That's it.
Yes, it is. I mean, they're both. They were both great players. I mean, really, really great players. They could play anywhere. I mean, King could have played for any club in the world at any time in the world, and Giles also. But Giles was a much more stable character, and in many ways, they're different people entirely. And there is a side of Keane that is totally irrational. And I've spoken to a number of players, Irish players, who played for him at Sunderland, at Ipswich, and he was brutal, like tough, and completely wrong. That's not the way to manage people. Coaching and management, I just think he's not good at. He was a great player, and he is in many ways a very fine man. He does things for the guide dogs. I know from my own researches, he will ring up terminally ill children and give them a call because the parents had asked for it. He does an awful lot of good in private. He doesn't seek publicity for things. There's a lot more good about Roy Keane than there is bad. But what is bad is rough. I mean, I got on very well with him. We did the book. And then I went back to my day job as, writing analysis and commentary for the Irish Daily Star. And then when he was at Sunderland and he did really well, I remember having a conversation with John Giles when he went to Sunderland, his first job. And we were both really excited, because if this guy could transfer his leadership qualities to management, then there would be a new and important figure in the game. And we were really excited. But it fell apart for reasons we've touched on. And then I didn't say much for a while, but for some reason, one week we had cause to be critical of him about his management of Sunderland. And I got a phone call from the late Michael Kennedy, who was his solicitor and agent. And he said, "What's going on?" "What are you talking about, Michael?" He said, "Well, we thought you were our friend." I said, "But I'm a journalist as well, Michael. I have to do my job." And at that point, I was on the enemy list. So he would, that's the way he is.
What did you say?
I said, look, I'm a journalist. You didn't buy me. You only leased me. And I have to go back to work, lads.
I mean, what had you said to incur the wrath?
I criticised, perhaps, the way he started very well at Sunderland. And then it dipped in a big way. And then there were rumours of fights and stuff like that. And somewhere along the line, I did a piece, and I think it might have been to do with players' wives not wanting to go to Sunderland. Or coaches' wives not wanting to go to Sunderland. Whatever it was, I don't know. But it wasn't a very big thing. I mean, it wasn't an attack. It was just a criticism as part of, work. But it reveals a kind of, should we say, a naive misunderstanding of what journalists do.
And a really thin skin.
Oh, very, yeah.
I think that was the other, and in a way that made him great. The thin skin, everybody was against him as a kid, that drove him on. Yeah. But the thin skin never kind of disappeared. It seems, certainly when he was in management. The thing about the punditry is really interesting, because you talked in private, he's very funny. He was hilarious the night of our roadshow.
Yes.
Perfect comic timing. Really amazing comic timing that isn't just funny for a footballer. It was legitimately funny. And I mean, I don't know where his punditry is going to go. I kind of enjoy it because I can.
Oh yeah, no, I think he's very good. He's certainly not afraid to call it as he sees it. He's not afraid to be critical of Manchester United and its players. I think he has obviously a good relationship and some considerable respect for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, which may be a thing that will conflict him at times. But he is. He's box office. I mean, if you're watching the Euros, that's where you go. And if you see him and Graham Souness on a Sunday afternoon on Sky, you're going to get intelligent, direct commentary, and it's very, very good. Not deep in Roy's case. He wouldn't be doing analysis with pens and hold it there and all of that stuff. But on the big picture stuff, he's very blunt. He's very good. And he certainly will be a major asset to ITV or Sky or whoever are employing him. And his knowledge of the game is good.
Do you think he's resigned to the possibility that he won't be a top-level manager again?
I don't know that he is entirely, because so many great things have happened in Roy's career in football, and the almost miraculous journey he made, from Cove to Old Trafford, and then all the things they won. And that kind of gives you a belief, in a way, that the impossible is doable, and that somebody will come along from a big club or a club with potential and offer him the job. I don't think that will happen. I think there's a general understanding in football, mainly emanating from players, that he's not good to work for, and he's trouble. And he's trouble for everybody. So I don't think he'll get it, a big job. I think he maybe harbours. I saw a quote from him a couple of months ago in which he said, there might be one more go in management, or I might get one more opportunity in management. I don't know if he will. And all the evidence we have from Sunderland, from Ireland, and indeed from Ipswich, is that he doesn't have the empathy. He's not rational. I mean, having a fight with John Walters, and it was a long fight because John was at Ipswich with him.
Yeah.
John Walters he's just one of the great guys. He's brave as a lion. He would no more feign injury. But I saw John Walters on the Late Late Show talking about it and how hurtful he had been to John. And that's a side of Roy that is unfortunate. I mean, I admire him, and I agree with you about the humour. It's very Cork. I must say. But he's bloody funny. And he spots a fake real quick. And he spots, things. And he's a very engaging and charming fella. I used to have a television show for 15 weeks. And we got Roy to come on the show. And he was staying in the Merrion. And we were doing the show in the Helix. And there was a member of our team, a girl, very nice young woman. And somebody had to go into the Merrion and pick him up and make sure everything was good. So I said to her, would you do that? That's your job for tonight. I said, no, I hate him. No, I'm not going near him. So I said, look, it's your job. You can't not do it. So go on. So she went in the limo to the Merrion, and she came. They arrived back at the Helix, and it gives you an idea of how his charisma. And he was so handsome and sort of almost beautiful and charismatic and smiling. And she got out. She got back into the Helix, into the dressing room. I said, "Well, how'd you get on?" "Oh my God, Eamon, he's beautiful." And he charmed her, and she said, "Can I take him back?" But it was a completely funny moment where the villain that she had in her mind, this thug, turns out to be charming, considerate, polite, respectful, and all of that. And of course, extremely good looking as well. It was just a very strange sort of example of how perception can be misleading.
Yeah, I remember the interview really well. You'd Alistair Campbell on that night as well, I think, and I remember.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, seeing Bob Geldof as well. What a show that was!
I remember seeing the two of them meeting in the green room and bonding over the fact that neither of them was drinking. Although I don't know, if memory serves, Alistair Campbell might have had a small whiskey.
Oh no, they went back to the Merrion. Actually, we went back with them. They were both drinking tea.
Right, very good. Look, this is completely off the point here, but the falling out you had with John Giles was when you were presenting The Last Word on Today FM. Is that right?
Yeah.
In 2002. Well,
yeah.
Thank you very much for having that brief 15-minute fallout, because as a result, Gilesy joined us here on Off the Ball and has been a mainstay ever since. So all's well that ends well.
It is, yeah. John's great man, and there is nobody on earth with as much knowledge and understanding of a football game. So you couldn't have a better guest. He's just amazing and remains amazing. And on the podcast I do, Stand, people just love his commentary, and they respect him so much. John is a gift to the world.
It was a wild time to be starting a nightly sports radio show, and I remember too that you were very generous with your time across that period when all sorts of stuff was going on. Everybody was a little bit tired and emotional at stages.
Yes, but what goes around comes around, doesn't it?
Exactly. Eamon, great stuff. Thanks a million. Oh, have you got one last?
Sorry, Eamon, I just have one more question before I let you go. Sorry, because we've been speaking so much about Roy Keane as a pundit, and you spoke about your relationship there, and I often wonder, did Roy Keane as a footballer, and before he gets into punditry, was there a quiet, I guess, appreciation for your punditry work from Roy Keane? Like, I would suspect that Roy Keane will get an amazing kick out of the Rod Little line.
Yeah, yeah. There was. I mean, they asked me, Michael Kennedy, and Roy asked me to write his book, which was a real compliment. I think he liked the way I didn't prostrate myself in front of Jack, because Roy had tough things to say about Jack, and I think he liked my stuff, and he didn't see me. Maybe he saw me as an old footballer in need of a dig out. But the fact that he chose me to do it, I regard as a compliment, and a very nice compliment, really.
Did Roy make money on the book, or did he lose money on the book after the fine?
He made a lot of money. I mean, the book is the second biggest hardback seller in Britain ever.
Wow.
Well, it was published directly after Saipan.
Right.
And he made plenty. 7 figures, I think.
Okay, so the fine was like, look, it was probably...
No, the fine was substantial, but I know the book made $1 million for him.
Right.
And you know, he kind of, and to be fair, he was captain of Manchester United, and the book was really a story of the journey. I mean, Rodney Doyle encountered Roy at a very different time when Roy had burnt his bridges with United, and you know, could say the things he couldn't say to me and for publications. So yeah, I was lucky. I wouldn't normally do a book like that, but I did, and I've no regrets about it, and I have huge admiration for him. I'm afraid it's not mutual, but I have a great time for him.
I'd say he's softened at this stage. Eamon, great to have you with us. Thanks a million.
My pleasure.